Open the meeting of the Harwich Conservation Commission for Wednesday, November 2nd, 2022. First item we have on the agenda is a request for determination of applicability for 754 Route 28, Map 24, Parcel S1. And do we have a proponent here tonight?
Do that again. It was muted, sorry.
I'm sorry. Did it not come through, Matt?
Could you just repeat what you just said?
Yeah, sure. The first item we have is a request for determination of applicability for 754 Route 28, Map 24, Parcel S1. And we're looking to see if we have a proponent for this application at the meeting tonight.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Paul Shea from Independent Environmental Consultants. I'm representing the applicant.
Okay, good evening.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Paul.
Yes. This is an after-the-fact RDA application that's been filed. The applicant had a couple of enforcement issues with the town to clear up. What we've done on the proposed plan that's before you is the applicant had a number of tents which were located adjacent to the existing building on the property. And some of these tents were located within the 60-foot no-build zone or no structure zone. So we removed the largest tent that he had, and we relocated 3 smaller tents to be located outside of the 60-foot no-build zone, no structure zone. There were 2 fences on the property with sections that were located inside the 60-foot no build zone. So we're removing those sections of the fence, 2 fences that are located within that 60-foot zone. And he had constructed a driveway, which is a pervious surface driveway, gravel, sand, gravel, and seashells, and that also was located within the buffer zone to the resource areas. We have a bordering vegetated wetland, we have a flood zone, and there's also a riverfront area within this property. So I talked with Amy earlier this week, and she thought that the commission might be looking for a planting plan for the project. So we sent in a proposed planting plan to plant native shrub species to be located within the 50-foot buffer zone of the BVW wetland and within the 50 to 100-foot buffer zone. The plantings that we're putting in are highbush blueberry, lowbush blueberry, chokeberry, and sweet pepper bush. And I believe she was going to be sending those plans out to you. So basically, we're trying to bring this project into compliance, and Amy thought the best way was to file an after-the-fact RDA.
All right, thank you very much. Amy, do you have comments on this?
Yep. So during the show cause hearing for Mr. Concordia, the owner, there was the commission who said, get everything out of the 50. There was some tents in the 50. There was some storage of product, things like that. And file an after-the-fact RDA for the remaining items that are greater than the 60 feet from the resource. And that's what you see in front of you. Mr. Concordia has made a lot of progress. He worked very quickly to get this property back into compliance. He moved his, like I said, moved his tent and his product. The barn and the shed that are on here were on previous plans that we had on file, so those were not in violation, even though they are located where they are. They showed up on an earlier filing with the Conservation Commission. Let's see. So what you're being asked to approve is now to keep, he has a couple sections of fencing in the back of the store that extend to the 60-foot buffer. And they have a couple of tents they would like to have as well in the buffer. And then in the front of the property, if you're looking at the plan, on the left side of the main store, you had the actual asphalt driveway, but Mr. Concordia had installed some gravel shell area to the left of that, and that was flood zone slash riverfront area, not within the 100-foot buffer to the wetland. So we got the application. I let Mr. Concordia and Mr. Shane know that even though the tents are tents and not really permanent structures, they have been used kind of permanently on the site historically. And as well as the gravel area, things like that, those would require mitigation in the amount of 2 to 1. And what has been provided, and I apologize, I did not print copies out, but they should be in your Dropbox, was the mix of high bush blueberry, low bush blueberry, choke bush, sweet pepper bush. That's in the buffer, in kind of disturbed open area there, and I do think that will enhance kind of the, the buffer to that wetland in the rear. I think that's it. So I would be recommending a -2 and 3 determination. Work is both in a resource area as well as in the buffer zone. But it's going to be an improvement over what was previously there.
Okay, great, thank you. Comments from the commissioners. Wayne, do you have?
No, I don't have anything.
No? Jim?
No comment.
No. John? Dan? Wonderful. I have no comments either. So, can we have a motion on this, please?
Sure. I'll move that we approve the request for a determination of applicability for 754 Route 28, map 24, parcel S1 with a -2 and -3 determination.
You have a second, please?
Second.
Seconded by Mark. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, you're all set. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Next item on the agenda is a request for a notice of intent for 25 Lothrop Avenue, map 12, parcel A1, an after-the-fact permit for a pole installation project by Eversource. Do we have?
Good evening. For the record, this is Amanda Houle of Ty and Bond presenting this evening on behalf of Eversource. I'm also joined this evening by James Clancy with Eversource, as well as my colleague, Peter Backus. And I just wanted to mention, my power, ironically, has been flickering for the last half hour, so I know Peter is poised to take over for some reason. My power happens to go out again, but the irony is not lost on me, given we have an Eversource project in front of me right now. So this is an after-the-fact filing, as you mentioned, for a pole installation at Station 974 at 25 Lothrop Avenue. Conservation staff noticed the work occurring and made a comment to Eversource that a permit was required. So we are appearing before you now for that activity. As we started to pull together the permitting application and the field reconnaissance for the wetland delineation, it became evident that some of the site preparation to install this utility pole resulted in some direct BVW impacts, as well as impacts to your 50-foot no disturb zone, riverfront area, land subject to coastal zone flowage, and the overall 100-foot buffer zone. This pole was required in order to mount what's called a recloser switch for the substation. There have been some serious reliability issues in terms of the electric supply in Harwich as it relates to this substation. This recloser switch is essentially like a large breaker switch. So if the power goes out, the recloser switch will flip. Prior to the installation of this, if the power went out, it would take down the whole substation. And so the whole town would lose power. The installation of this recloser switch allows just the line feeding into the station from the side to trip that so it doesn't trip the other line going out. So if half of the town goes down, the recloser switch will keep the rest of the town from losing power. This also provides communication capabilities from this station and this line to Eversource now, which didn't exist previously. So it will also result in quicker power restoration times, which will also improve just the reliability of the electric service in town. So I can, Amy, I don't know if it's helpful if I share my plan or if the commissioners have something in front of them.
They have everything, but I mean, it's up to you.
If there are any highlights you'd like to point out that you think would help us, that would be great.
Absolutely. Share screen here. Monitor one. Share. Right. Okay, so here we are at the substation right here. There's BBW surrounding all three sides of the substation, so it's just really tight in terms of site constraints. Lothrop Avenue is right here. There's existing distribution line up and down the side of the street. And the new utility pole is this red dot right here, sort of on this southern side of the station. To install this dot, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you guys can see this a little bit better. To install this pole, this area needed to be graded and gravelled in order to provide access for the trucks and bucket trucks to bring that pole in and to erect it and to connect it into the substation. In order to maintain this pole and the recloser switch long term, Eversource is seeking to retain this gravel pad, which is essentially this black outlined box with the hash marks inside of it. Approximately 1/3 of this gravel pad, which is the orange hatching that you see here, is within the wetland, or what formerly was bordering vegetated wetlands. So we estimated that to be conservatively 328 square feet. And the gravel pad as a whole is just shy of 1,600 square feet, as you can see in these two call outs. As you can see, given the site constraints, on-site replication in order to mitigate for this wetland fill is not really possible because everything is basically wetland or existing substation. So as part of this filing and during some pre-application consultation that we had with Amy, Eversource evaluated other offsite properties that they own. But given the existing site conditions of these other substations, they're either too built out, there weren't really existing wetlands that we could add on to. We didn't find any feasible options to replicate. Therefore, we are requesting that the commission, one, approve the retention of this gravel pad in the wetland fill, and then that they allow Eversource to pay through the town's in lieu fee program to offset these impacts so that those funds can go to a more ecologically valuable restoration project in town through the Conservation Commission. In addition, we understand that a waiver is required for work directly within BBW as well as in the 50-foot no disturbance zone. So those are the items we are seeking your authorization for. And it's pretty simple. It's a pretty simple project. It's just sort of after the fact. So I'll turn it over if the commission has any questions at this point.
Okay, great. Thank you. Amy, do you have comments on this?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it is a pretty simple project, but if just a regular homeowner came in and wanted to do something like this, it's certainly not something that we would permit. So we have to look at it, understand that this activity is considered a limited project under the Wetland Protection Act. We don't see much of this, but basically the construction, reconstruction, operation and maintenance of underground and overhead utilities such as electrical distribution or transmission lines, there is a lessening of regulation on those things because it's a public utility. However, they have to meet the following criteria. They have to, the issuing authority, meaning the Conservation Commission, may require a reasonable alternative with fewer adverse effects for local distribution or connecting lines. So something I would like for you to address, Amanda, or somebody else on the call with you, is were there other alternatives? Could it have been without having to do a new pole, without having to do any of that? I'm certainly not versed in this, but that's one thing that you didn't speak to. And then best available measures should be used to minimize adverse effects during construction. Silt fence wasn't even put up. There's still nothing holding the gravel. If we get a major rainstorm, there needs to be if we do approve this, there needs to be a way to make sure it doesn't spread. So those are my 2 points. I do understand, the importance of having this to the town as a public utility to make sure that our power does stay on. But I guess I'll leave it at that. Oh, so for the commission's edification, the total amount they're requesting to pay in lieu fees is $6,366, and that's at $4 per square foot of alteration. But before we even get there, the questions that I still have about reasonable alternatives, and your response to no silt fence being used and what can be done in the future to make sure we don't see migration of the gravel are outstanding.
Certainly, I would be happy to speak to that the best I can, and then I might potentially look to James Clancy with Eversource if he has anything additional to add. In terms of the gravel, potential for it to erode and just containing it long term, we can certainly explore options for some sort of containment, perhaps grading the side slopes of that pad so they're less vertical. I think that there are a few options there that we're happy to explore, between Eversource and the commission. So I think that would be pretty easy to satisfy in terms of preventing long-term erosion into the adjacent wetland. Regarding your other question about alternatives, given we were working within the riverfront area, our notice of intent does include an alternatives analysis. And as part of that, we explored the possibility to locate the pole in different locations surrounding the substation. And I'll share my screen again too, because that's probably a little bit more helpful than
I apologize, I did see your alternatives analysis, but I think it's still good for you to run through it.
Yep, absolutely. No, that's why I'm here. I'm more than happy to walk everyone through it. So it's tough to see on this map, but if you drive down there, there's existing overhead coming into the station here. And so it really precluded being able to put a pole there, and the recloser needed to tie into this side of the station. If they wanted to put it on any other side of the station, it would have resulted in wetland fill. This side of the station had the most upland available. It unfortunately did result in a small amount of direct wetland impact, but given the need to tie into this, I don't know if it's a bus or something, this overhead structure, in the station, it had to be on this side. And in order to address this reliability concern, this distribution line that feeds into this side of the station that previously did not have the recloser switch is what was tripping this entire substation and causing townwide outages. So It's not like they could pop a recloser, somewhere else in town or on a different station. That this was the, exact location, where it needed to occur. And it couldn't be sited, in front of the substation either, where it appears, kind of at face value, it's like, oh, it looks like there's a little more area there, but it needed to come in off of this side of the station. And there are numerous design codes and regulations in terms of clearance and siting and heights of things and how they all come into the substation that I as a wetland scientist, I'm not very well versed in, but I know that's all evaluated very carefully too. So they're very exact places where these types of equipment need to be located.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, question from the commissioners. Wayne?
I mean, it's already done, and there's not much we can do about it. Certainly not gonna make them take the pole down or anything like that. I was up there this morning, and I didn't see any evidence of erosion. We had a 4-inch rainstorm just the other day. And I don't see any problem with this, other than the fact that, they're gonna have to chip in some money to, that's about it.
Al?
No comment.
Jim?
No comment.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with what Wayne said. I went down there and took a look at it as well, and regulations speak for themselves, and but the circumstances do too, and I think the utility companies need some support in this particular case. To me, the risk of the company not acting as they did would not be responsible to their customers and to the general public. And I don't think it would be advantageous to hinder what they're trying to do. So I would be in support of leaving it as it is. I think we're gonna create more damage by going forward. That's about all I can add.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, okay, I'm not entirely in agreement with my colleagues. I understand that this had to be done, the pole had to be installed, and there's a question about reliability of electrical service to the town. But my questions are about process here. And I think that you guys failed in terms of process here in a very sensitive area. And you talked about doing a bunch of alternatives analysis. And my question is, your organization clearly put in a lot of effort doing the design, determining what had to be done here. I don't understand why no one in that process mentioned or realized that there needed to be a discussion with conservation, there needed to be permits. I think it's unacceptable that you didn't come for permits first and had a conversation with the Conservation Commission about the alternatives rather than just doing the work, coming back later and asking for forgiveness. I don't accept that. I don't think that's a good idea at all. And I'm very unhappy with this. Yes, I like to have my power on in my house 24/7, 365 days a year. But this is a very sensitive area. We give other people a hard time about just doing something within 50 feet of wetlands, let alone intruding into the wetlands and not taking any care in the process. So I have one question, which is, what kind of training does Eversource do for its field workers about wetlands and wetland regulations? Why did somebody come in here and just put this gravel out into what was obviously a wetland without any notion of whether there was a permit in place? What is the training process at Eversource for your field people and your engineers about wetlands permitting processes?
I can answer that, then I might turn it over to James to see if he has anything additional to add. But this is not a standard practice. Typically, the Eversource project planning process brings in Eversource Environmental Department, which James is a part of, and then they consult during the planning and design. This was just an exception to their typical process, and I completely understand and hear your concerns, and they're completely valid, and it's not standard for Eversource. I know as one of their contractors, that does their wetland permitting. We're involved very early on, and this just was unfortunately an exception to the rule. James Clancy, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, Amanda, I don't really have anything extra to add. I would say I completely understand how the commission feels about this. I sort of felt the same way when I was notified of this project happening. Like Amanda said, we usually get notified very early on in the planning process of these projects. Unfortunately, with the amount of projects we have, especially down in your area with reliability, some of them can just slip through, especially the smaller ones, like just a pole install. So I do apologize for that. That's not how we run our business usually. We're usually very much involved early on.
So I actually have a follow-up question, which is, could you please just explain for us, since none of us are familiar with your procedures, your requirements, why you had to make that big parking area to the right, as opposed to, there seemed to be a lot of room in front of where the substation is, in the front part of the new gravelled area. Why did you need even more area back there? How many trucks do you need in there to service the disconnect or breakers up there on that new pole?
It needs to accommodate at least 2 bucket trucks, so the big line trucks with the boom, with the bucket on them. And the way that they need to enter, they need to be on that south side of the pole where that gravel pad is, because they're not able to elevate their boom with a worker in it with the proper clearance from the other existing overhead energized lines and from the existing energized equipment in the substation. So that configuration and distance is just standard, and they made the smallest pad area possible just to accommodate the bare minimum of trucks that they would need to bring in. But those bucket trucks are pretty large, and sometimes they need to place down outriggers to stabilize the truck when they raise the boom up and down. So it needs a little bit of width there, but I certainly understand that, and I know that's something that James and I asked the distribution team, when we were notified of this, why did this have to be here? Can we put it over there? And that's part of what they explained to us.
One more question, more to Amy or fellow commissioners, is one thing that's missing in this document is any engineered site plan. There are photographs only. And so I don't know that there's no accurate basis for actually computing like what the existing conditions were before they did the work, and how much wetlands was actually interfered with, and how much upland within the 50 to 100-foot buffer. I think we need at least an engineered site plan here so we know what happened.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why that wasn't provided.
Sorry if I missed that too.
I don't see that here. Maybe.
No, it's not. So there's a Figure 3 project plan, which is it's not a stamped engineered plan. And I do think, Amanda and James, that especially something in a wetland and in the 50-foot, we would have wanted a stamped engineered plan for that. And not kind of just a rendering.
I guess for what it's worth, typically for pole installations like this, it's Eversource standard to provide a GIS-based plan. My team has been out there with sub-meter GPS units investigating historic site conditions, present site conditions, and has delineated in the field with that sub-meter GPS the pole location, the limits of the gravel pad, as well as the wetland impact that myself and Peter, both professional wetland scientists, were able to deduce from our investigations in the field, and collected those limits and those area impacts with that sub-meter accuracy GPS.
Does Eversource, as just a normal matter of procedure, keep engineered site plans for its substations? Do you have on file an engineered site plan for this substation prior to when the work was done?
It's possible. I don't know if it shows resource areas, but I know a lot of their facilities, they do have to some extent, engineered drawings. James, I don't know if you can speak to that anymore about what might exist in terms of data.
Yeah, I think the only engineered plans we might have are on the actual circuit template. I think this is an older station, so unfortunately, I think a lot of that data might be paper and not actually something we could get a hold of at the moment. And like Amanda said, I very much doubt that we'd have any sort of resource area data on those older maps.
Thank you.
Stan, do you have any comments, questions?
No further comments.
No, I think John pretty much covered the questions that I had on my list. One sort of fundamental question, I didn't see anywhere in the project plan here, when was this work done?
September. I believe it was September.
September, yes.
Okay. And just as a side comment, I mean, I understand your frustration, John. I think historically, Eversource has been fairly good as far as coming to us on projects that they're doing around town. This one really surprised me that we were caught flat-footed by this, and you folks as well. And I guess my disappointment is furthered by the fact that now you gotta raise your rates to cover another $6,000 in fines, but, you know, is what it is. We all end up paying for it eventually. So with that, are there any other comments, questions from the commissioners? Then can we have a motion on this, please?
Sure. Let me try to include everything. Okay, I move that we approve the notice of intent and the after-the-fact permit and request for variance by Eversource Energy for 25 Lothrop Avenue, map 12, parcel A1.
And a second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carries. After fact is approved. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
No.
Thank you very much.
On the feet, then tuck it one up on the other side of the Great Lake, the big one.
Next item on the agenda is 11 Skinnequit Lane, map 17, parcel A1-H3. I don't know, how do you want to present this? Amy, do you want to comment first, or do you want to have comments from the opponent on this?
Tim, what's your pleasure?
For the record, Tim Santos from Merrill Engineers.
Thank you.
This is kind of a unique situation. If you want, I can kind of give a brief overview, turn it over to Amy, and then
That'd be fine,
I guess
sure.
we'll say go from there. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Hold on 1 second. So, can everybody see that?
Yep.
All right. So, the project's located at 11 Skinnequit Lane. Existing single-family homes on the property. We originally filed a notice of intent to do a tear down and rebuild of a portion of the house, as shown on the plan before you. The initial notice of intent was filed with the town. Abutters were notified. One of the abutters, Mr. Knight, was a former commissioner and brought to our attention that the stream, I guess that is to the west of the property, along this area here, is a man-made stream that was permitted back in 1927 for agricultural use, and therefore there's no riverfront associated with that. When we originally flagged it, Brad Holmes from ECR flagged it. I was unaware of that. He was unaware of that. I believe Amy was unaware of that. So it was kind of new information to us. It came the day of the last hearing, October 19th, the original hearing. Amy and I talked. We decided that it probably was best to do a little research on that and continue that initial hearing to tonight's date. So Amy and I kind of went back and forth, and removing that riverfront area basically takes the project that we're doing here outside of jurisdiction. I do have the 100-foot buffer to the bordering vegetated wetland and the 100-foot buffer to the coastal bank. So all the work is outside of it. We originally talked about withdrawing the application, but then I believe Amy felt it was best that we have something on record, paper copy, and that's kind of why we're here tonight, trying to figure out the best way to move forward with this project and the board. So I'll kind of unshare and then turn it over to Amy and then answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. Amy?
Yep, so the day of the last meeting, as Tim said, it was kind of brought to our attention that the herring run between Skinnequit Pond and Red River Marsh is a man-made canal or ditch. When you look at the Rivers Act, which is 310 CMR 10.58, it says that there is no riverfront area to those man-made ditches or canals. They themselves are wetlands, but they don't have a 200-foot associated riverfront area from them. I did ask Mr. Knight to provide, because he had alluded to a 1927 agricultural plan. I don't recall getting that, but I will check. I did check with kind of local knowledge. It makes sense that this is a man-made canal for agricultural purposes. And yeah, I'm not disagreeing. I do think it is a man-made canal or ditch back from the 1920s that, and one or two of the commissioners who may know have more history to it. But what this means is the project is outside the 100-foot buffer to a coastal bank. We do have a coastal bank here. It is not like a sediment supplying coastal bank. It is a coastal bank that prevents flooding. It's at the edge of flood zone abutting the stream. And I did recommend, there was a couple options: withdraw this application because technically they don't need to apply. They could have withdrawn and filed an RDA for a commission to technically determine that it's not within jurisdiction, or since we've already advertised it and we're already here talking about it, it makes sense for the commission to have this discussion tonight and for you to determine if or if not you believe you have Rivers Act jurisdiction here. My recommendation is that you determine we do not have a riverfront area here and that this project is not within your jurisdiction.
All right, thank you. Have comments from the commissioners? Alan?
No comment.
Two of you guys, one of you would know about the history of this thing.
Oh, well, as far as the cranberry bogs, yes, I mean, they're all man-made,
Yeah,
that's all I'll say.
but this river in particular, you're not aware of this,
I read some deeds and
They're all handled,
research,
yeah.
I read some of the research, and there was a license drawn back in the 20s to do this activity, so I would assume at that time that's man-made.
yeah. And from a agricultural perspective, you can justify the.
The reasonings for it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Oh,
definitely,
absolutely.
definitely.
okay, good, thank you. Jim?
No comment.
No remarks?
John?
No comments.
Sam? No comment. Okay. One question for you. I think somewhere in the material I saw that one of the rationale for deciding it was man-made was there were areas of it that were just straight and didn't follow a contour, but looking at the map here, it looks about as wild configured as you could get.
When I was talking about the straight areas, it's the area on the other side of Uncle Vaney's Road where it connects to.
Oh, I see.
But to me, it makes sense it was all done at the same time.
Yeah. All right, good.
And it probably, the reason it's probably like it is this was likely hand dug. So they're going to go with whatever the path of least resistance and material is, so it's not, it may not be linear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let me ask if there are any questions from the audience, comments? Okay, none? Can we have a motion on this, please?
Sure. I'll move that with respect to the property located at 11 Skinnequit Lane, map 17, parcel A1-H3, that this property is not riverfront area, and that the proposed project on said property is outside of the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission.
Great, thank you. Can we have a second on that?
Second.
Second by Mark, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? One abstention. All right, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for the help, Amy, too.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is revisiting the notice of intent for 49 Saquatucket Bluffs Road, map 8, parcel G1-4.
Good evening. For the record, Sean Riley, Coastal Engineering, representing the applicant. The last time we were here, the commission members had some questions that they'd like answered and had some requests as far as shifting the proposed patios and moving them around so that we get them out of the 60-foot buffer. I'll start with the easy questions. There was a concern that the septic system be properly addressed as far as the removal of the system and all its system components. The existing septic system is in the footprint of the proposed structure, so they will be removed in its entirety, and the proposed system will be located further away and also outside of the 100-foot buffer. One of the other items requested was a full grading plan to show the direction of the stormwater flow to make sure that it wasn't flowing back down into the resource area. As you can see from the spot grades, everything is directed down the driveway and over to a catch basin in the corner of the driveway. Again, all the roof runoff is directed via gutters and downspouts to dry wells. So we are capturing all of the stormwater runoff. The patios, the closest point of any of the walls that support the patio are greater than 60 feet or 60 feet and greater. And you were also asked to provide spot grades adjacent to those walls so that you can see the level of grading that's happening. You can see that there really isn't a large amount of grading that's happening within the area. Essentially, they are just seat walls that band around the edge of the patio. The commission asked if we could add some more mitigation to what we were proposing, and to review our mitigation numbers to make sure that we weren't capturing anything that or double dipping on anything that was already native plants. We've done that. From where we shifted the everything back to the 60 feet, we've captured all of this additional area with mitigation plantings and pulled it back to the 100-foot buffer. We've eliminated the proposed rollout walkway. With shifting this back a little further, we've just reoriented the footpath to come off of the reconfigured patio in this area. So we are asking to maintain just a 4-foot wide footpath to the stairs that we discussed last time to be rebuilt in kind. And some information was requested for the plant beds that were to be placed around the dwelling and on the patio and we've provided the information essentially within those plant bed areas. We've got inkberry, beach grass, and other coastal dune plants. The applicant really wants to return everything back to nature. They're not a big fan of lawns. So in this case, we've got a good client that wants to really just bring everything back. I think we've touched on everything. I don't think I missed anything. I know we got a letter from NHESP with a request for some time of year restrictions, which I'm sure Amy will get into and adopt into the order should this be approved. With that, I'll open it up to any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Amy, do you have comments on this?
Corinne, do you have anything you wanted to add?
I think Sean summarized it well, but just on one of his last comments, working with this applicant, the Hoskins, in recent conversations, it really became apparent how naturalized they want. They do not want a green lawn. They want beach grass. They want native pollinating flower species that will attract monarchs and other butterflies. So actually, we're only showing our work within the 100-foot buffer, but we're going to extend the meadow area beyond the 100-foot. We didn't want to show it just because we didn't want you to think we were claiming it as mitigation, but this is going to be a really nice naturalized property.
Okay, so, the last meeting, you requested that any new structure be at least 60 feet from the resource. They were able to accomplish that. Let's see, so between the top of Coastal Bank and the house, there's currently lawn, and that would be mitigation planting area. Still planning on removing the invasive plants that are in the 0 to 50-foot buffer and on the bank, and to replant with natives. They did revise their coverage tables. Essentially, the net increase in hardscape, there's a net decrease in the 0 to 50 of 53 square feet, and a net increase in the 50 to 100 of 1,800, or 1,586. 2-to-1 mitigation for that is 3,172. They're proposing of the lawn removal and where the house is, that accounts for about 2,100 square feet of area that's truly gonna be replanted as either, like I said, currently structure or as lawn. And the buffer and the coastal bank between on the coastal bank and in the 0 to 50-foot buffer, I would say it's roughly a 50-50 mix of invasives to natives. They are planning on removing the invasives and replanting natives. There's a big empty bare spot, 600 square feet. We're not really sure why, any of us, why it's like that. But that is proposed to be replanted. So I think what they're proposing to do in that 0 to 50, improve species diversity, habitat, things like that, outweighs the 1,000-ish square foot difference for mitigation. And combined with the condition that no fertilizers or chemicals aside from what Wilkinson might need to treat invasives, I think what they've offered is going to be an improvement to the property. I recommend approval.
Thank you. Wayne, do you have any questions?
There's an existing house here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just go back to my septic thing. I just want to make sure that existing system is cleaned out, completely taken out the concrete structures, whatever it may be, and all the leaching stone, if there is any, in the contaminated soil to be removed and then filled in with clean sand.
It will be, because the house is going where.
It's gonna be filled in with house.
Want to make sure it's on the,
Yeah.
in the paperwork.
Alan?
No comment?
Jeff?
No comment.
Mark?
No remarks, thank you.
Dan? I just had one question, was more information from my point of view. You mentioned there were some trees that you were going to coppice.
Yes.
Coppice a tree, is that the right
Yeah,
word?
yep.
Right. So the new growth will come up around the existing stump that's still in the ground. Will that stump decay eventually and impair the growth of the new tree?
It shouldn't. So these had already been either topped or historically they have been managed. And so we would flush cut it to the ground, and either they grow kind of right out around the edges of that. And I think over time, I mean, the Native Americans used to do this, and there's actually on the vineyard, there's trees that are 300 or 400 years old that there's a hole in the regrowth is feet away, and in between there's nothing growing there. I actually saw one this fall at one of our projects. So it's an old practice of maintaining trees. And so I think over time that center must decay, but then it's able to regrow and continue to
The roots
flourish.
coming
Yeah,
out from that.
yeah,
Interesting. Fascinating.
yeah.
Good to know. Okay, good. No, I have no other questions. Any questions from members of the audience? Hearing none. Can we have a motion on this, please?
Sure, I'll move that we approve the project to be located at 49 Saquatucket Bluffs Road, map 8, parcel G1-4.
Thank you. Do we have a second, please?
I'll second.
Seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries then.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, we're excited.
Yeah, it's gonna be beautiful when you're done, I'm sure. So the next item we have on the agenda is 10 Braddock Street. Again, this follow-up, map 7 parcel F20. Again, it's an addition, septic, hardscape, and landscaping.
Hey.
Good evening.
Good evening. Stephanie Sequin with Roder and Wilcox and Kimberly Mercurio, representing Sam Park. Sam was not able to attend tonight, but he is listening in. So at the meeting, I guess it was 4 weeks ago, you reviewed the plans for, this is an expansion of an existing dwelling within the 100-foot buffer to a coastal dune. I think the biggest concern that we took away from all of your comments was with the original proposal, we had a very slight increase in the square footage of structure within the 0 to 50-foot buffer. So you asked if we could take another look at positioning the expansion to get more of it outside of the 50-foot buffer, or to reduce the square footage of what it was being proposed in the 50-foot buffer. And then you also had comments about the mitigation, I will guess the numbers on the mitigation, and also the quality of the mitigation being proposed. So we've submitted a revised plan, and hopefully you're looking at the site plan that's revised October 21st. We took the bulk of the addition and shifted it landward, away from the dune, 4 feet, and then also took out a chunk of the wing on the west side, closest to that right-of-way. So pushed the whole thing back and also reduced the square footage of the footprint. And as it's now being proposed, we have reduced, or with the removal of a portion of the existing structure and the construction of the addition, we'll have a 38 square foot reduction of structure within the 0 to 50-foot buffer, as well as a reduction in hardscaping within the 0 to 50-foot buffer. We are reducing the hardscaping by 648 square feet. The new coverage proposed within the 50 to 100-foot buffer of building, and I included decks, basically everything associated with the building itself. roof, obviously, decks, any steps leading up to the entryway. We've got a total of 2,452 square feet additional structure within the 50 to 100-foot buffer, and a 600 square foot reduction in hardscaping. So when I put together the calculations for what the required mitigation is, just looking at the existing versus proposed structure, not even taking into account the hardscaping, but just the building and decks and steps, we've got a 2,452 square foot increase in the 50 to 100 foot buffer, offset by the 38 square foot reduction within the 0 to 50, for a net increase of 2,414 square feet in the 50 to 100. So at 2 to 1, that gives us 4,828 square feet of mitigation that's required. And I, again, want to emphasize the fact that that's not even taking into consideration that we are eliminating over 1,200 square feet of hardscaping within your jurisdiction. So just looking at the increase in structure requires 4,828 square feet of mitigation. And on Kimberly's revised mitigation plan, she is proposing there's several areas of mitigation. The areas that are in and immediately adjacent to the resource area, she's showing 5,573 square feet of mitigation, so well over the 4,800 that's required. And in addition, there is another area of mitigation being proposed. It's within your jurisdiction, it's within the 100-foot buffer, it's not contiguous to the resource area, but I think it's still worthwhile to note that there's another over 900 square feet of mitigation being proposed. So I think that's it as far as what the changes to the site plan are from the previous meeting. Also, at the previous meeting, we had not gotten a response from NHESP, and we have since gotten a determination that this will not result in a take and will not have any adverse impact on endangered species, so we're good with them. Did you want to go
No,
over your?
I think you actually touched on everything I was going to say, but I guess the takeaway as far as the mitigation is that we made an effort to make sure that we were covering a contiguous area, just adjacent to the resource area here, that exceeds the mitigation requirement by about 600 square feet. And then we do have a little bonus area, again, as Stephanie said, within the jurisdiction of about 938 square feet up here. So.
Amy, you have comments?
Not really, actually. I mean, you touched everything I was gonna touch on, so I don't want to prolong this. With their changes that they've made, I'm recommending approval. I don't necessarily consider that 938 square feet as pure mitigation, but it does add value. It is certainly valuable, but the commission does look for continuity, but you're still over that 2-to-1 ratio. I think you minimized, especially I think where Mr. Park's kitchen was gonna be. That was kind of the western side near the path that the commission kind of asked to reduce. You did that. I don't have any other comments. I think you listened to what the commission had to say. And like the last one, I think this project, especially the area, the dune and the 50-foot buffer will be an improvement, even though you do have an expansion farther away.
Thank you. Comments from the commissioners?
Yeah, I don't remember if we put or I mentioned the thing about the septic system last time they were here, so I'll have to do it again and make sure that the septic system, the existing one, has to be removed completely with all the contaminated soil and then refilled in with clean sand.
Sure.
Alan, comments?
No, looks good.
Jim?
No comment.
Mark?
No remarks, thank you.
John?
Yeah, it looks good to me. I don't think you mentioned what you're doing with the lawn here, or if you did, I missed it. Just, are you planning, at least specifically within the 100-foot buffer, to make it a Cape Cod lawn? We will
Yeah, it'll be a Cape Cod lawn,
with Cape Cod
Absolutely.
seed mix, yeah.
yes.
Okay, all right.
Were
Thank
were
you.
you on the tour that we went on?
I was, but,
The property next
Next
door
door.
to this one.
oh, that's right.
The Clover?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
we'll be doing that.
What they're
Okay, thank you for reminding me.
Stan? No comment. And I have none either. You know, it's seldom I see a small house being replaced by something this big. But I think your plans are fabulous. I applaud you for this.
Thank you.
So, with that, can we have a motion, please?
Sure. I'll move that we approve the project to be located at 10 Braddock Street, map 7, parcel F20.
And a second, please?
Second.
Second by Wayne. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
This is Sam Park. I wanted to thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you as neighbors soon.
Hey, we'll aspire to that.
That sounds great. The scotch is always on my porch, as I said last time.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is a notice of intent for Donald and Eno, 14 Mill Point Road, map 1 parcel J1-94. Amy?
Yep, they're waiting for one more piece of information from their marine biologist consultant, so they weren't able to get it by our last Wednesday deadline, so they've asked for a continuance to November 16th. I fully expect them to be here November 16th.
November 16th, okay, next meeting then. Can we have a motion to extend this, please?
Sure. I'll move that we extend the hearing for 14 Mill Point Road, map 1, parcel J1-94, to our meeting of November 16th, 2022.
Second.
Seconded by Mark, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item in the agenda, order of conditions for Ed Doherty, this is for the Air Lane Property Owners Association for sand nourishment. Amy?
Yep, so basically the orders of conditions are the conditions that the Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program put on the project. They are consistent with what the town has to do in terms of monitoring and reporting. I'll say in the 11 years I've been here, we've never had plovers on this association beach. There's very little room above mean high water. And it's the rock revetments pretty much all in this area. So technically it is still mapped. They will have to check, to be honest. When I do my check for C Street Beach, I always go up that area anyways and check it. But that area will need to be checked and monitored, you know, as per those conditions, just in case we get nesting shorebirds. But again, due to the nature of that area, it is a very undesirable place for them to be. If you have any questions on the conditions, let me know.
Look good to me.
Anyone have any comments, questions? So if they're restricting the period that they can conduct these activities between April 1st and August 31st, that's the plover season anyhow, right?
They can do it as long as they have a monitor, if they need a monitor. So if there's no record of birds, they can do it. But, yeah, it would have to be determined annually by a monitor.
Okay, because it says under number 4 that they cannot do it unless they otherwise approved in writing by Natural Heritage and us.
It's us,
Okay.
really. That makes that determination, because we're the ones with the boots on the ground checking the birds.
Yep. All right, good.
We do it, we just, on our beaches, we have monitors, so.
comments. Can we have a motion on this, please?
Sure. I'll move that we close the public hearing and approve the order of conditions for the Air Lane Property Owners Association, Air Lane Beach, SE 32-2511.
Thank you. Second, please.
Second.
Seconded by Mark. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item, we have a request for a certificate of compliance for 19 Weequassett Road, map 5, parcel K1-41, SE 32-2360A. Amy, do you have comments on this?
Yep, so the permit was for conversion of a porch to a sunroom, install a roof over another portion of patio, and install solar panels on the roof. Through that came an enforcement to fix certain items that were done not in compliance. And I'm happy to say that everything is into compliance now. The last item, which was a small fence right at the top of bank, has been removed. I recommend a cert of compliance with the ongoing condition that there is not to be any new structure without conservation permission, including fences. And I'd recommend a cert of compliance also with the condition to outstanding condition of no chemical or fertilizer application. This is a property, every so often we may need to inspect.
Okay. Just for my information, in looking through the items that are in Dropbox, I did not see this one in there.
Oh, I apologize. They did provide an as-built plan, but it was this has been on our agenda for a while, so it didn't migrate over.
Oh, I see.
I apologize.
All right.
But he is in compliance, and Mr. Stevens is online,
Good.
if you want to hear from Mr. Stevens.
Anything you'd like to add, Mr. Stevens?
No, it took a little while for the septic enhancement. If you recall, there was a nitrogen reduction that was added to the septic system out front, and we had to get that installed and processed through the Board of Health. And once that was done, we were compliant, if you will.
Good. Terrific. All right. So can we have a motion, please, on this?
Okay, I'll move that we approve the certificate of compliance for 19 Weequassett Road, map 5, parcel K1-41, SE 32-2360A, under the condition that there be no new structures on the property without the approval of the Conservation Commission.
Okay, have a second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a certificate of compliance request for 5 Salt River Lane, map 4, parcel A1-B3, file SE 32-2328. Amy?
This was a revetment on the river. We did receive the as-built plan with the locations of the benchmark on the rock wall. However, we have not received the annual monitoring reports that speak to the integrity of the wall, elevation of the beach and marsh, and success of the mitigation plantings. They're supposed to be submitting those either annually or biannually, I can't remember off the top of my head. I told the engineer that until we at least get one to get started on it, with an ongoing condition that they supply others, I can't recommend a cert of compliance, and they understood that. So we don't need to continue it to, it's not a hearing, we don't need to continue it to a date certain or anything like that, but once they supply those a monitoring report, we'll put them back on the agenda for discussion.
All right. How many years monitoring?
It was 3 years worth,
And how long was the first one past due?
about 3 years. 2 or 3 years. So.
Did they give you any explanation of why?
No, I think it'd be something to ask. 'Cause I've talked with their landscape, with their replanting contractor, and I've gotten stuff on the plants, but I haven't gotten anything about the integrity of the wall or the beach and marsh elevation, which would be probably more engineering.
Okay.
But
All right. This is the property.
there just seems to be a disconnect.
This is the property they want to do hardscaping along
They had fiber rolls prior, and they were allowed to replace with stone.
all right,
And replant the coastal bank and whatnot.
okay. So we don't need to take
You
any
don't need to
action on
take
this.
action.
All right, next item on the agenda, show cause hearing for 117 Riverside Drive, unpermitted cutting of vegetation within the riverfront area and the buffer zone. Good evening.
Thank you, members of the board. Tabitha Eldridge was trying to sign in to go to a meeting here.
Okay.
So I'm just checking with him.
If Tabitha's never used it before, just to download it, it takes an extra minute or two.
Yeah, I texted her.
Yeah.
Trying to get her.
Okay.
I gave her when you started certificates of compliance.
Yeah.
So,
There is also a phone number on the agenda too.
yeah, so.
Amy, why don't I let you,
Sure. Oh,
She
Brad.
only has to address a minor issue. Tabitha. Okay, so we can start without her.
I'm,
Okay.
I'm sorry, so as a matter of procedure, you have an issue you'd like to present? No.
There was just a question, one of the questions that comes up in here was about the mitigation planning, and Tabitha Eldridge works for Davenport Tree Farm, and it was, she can speak to the availability of the mitigation plants at the time. That's the only issue she needs to speak to. She's a professional in that area, so we thought you'd want to hear it from her rather than us.
Okay. All right, with that, Amy?
Sure, thank you. It came to our attention recently that there had been some activity at the property that abutted Mr. Sullivan's property. Mr. Sullivan's property is 123 Riverside Drive. The activity that took place, according to the owner of, the other owner, which was 117 Riverside Drive, was activity that was on the coastal bank within the buffer, especially the 50, and within the inner riparian zone to the river. According to the neighbor, and of course this is your chance when I finish to give your side, essentially, of the story, was the neighbor that Mr. Sullivan had requested of his neighbor to be able to clean kind of dead and down stuff as a result of the tornado on the property that abuts Mr. Sullivan's, which Mr. Blanchard, the owner, had said yes. And then what was discovered was that a machine had actually been brought in there, removed several trees, and disturbed the ground cover and shrub layer on 117 as well as 123 Riverside Drive, which is Mr. Sullivan's property. Let's see, this was in October, middle of October. So the owner of 117 asked us to go out there. We went out and discovered that between the two properties, I did count at least 6 trees that either had been, and I looked again today, there's at least 4 stumps and there's holes where a couple of trees had used to have been. I think 6 is actually an underestimation, but 6 that I can say with confidence. And then the ground cover, as the machine was brought in, there was a lot of just native grasses, low shrub layer. This was disturbed, removed really. And a lot of the trees within the view corridor between the river and Mr. Sullivan's house had been limbed. So why don't we deal with that one first, and then we'll deal with the order of conditions that was already issued for Mr. Sullivan's property. So we'll deal with this piece first, if that makes sense.
Sure. That makes sense. I did get a report from Tabitha. She'll be with us in a minute.
Great.
She has young children. We'll leave it at that.
So my recommendation is fines for the cutting of each of the trees and the disturbance to the ground cover layer. And then a replanting, let's see. I apologize. File an after-the-fact permit by February 1st with site plan for for replanting of that area that was disturbed. It is to include at least 6 trees. And trees in the approximate location where they were removed. So that after the fact permit would be due, application is February 1st. And the whole idea is that it would tee you up to replant in May, or spring of this year, the appropriate growing season. So that's what I have for this one, for
All
this
right.
piece of things.
Good. Would you like to comment?
Yes, we have some comments about this too. I have with me Kerry Sullivan. The property is owned by Kerry and his wife, Kendall Knox. They purchased the property in May 2021, okay? They moved into the property in June 2022. I say that because I was out to the property, and there are certain stumps that are cut in the area of the property. But if you look at them, and I'm not an arborist, but based on my experience, there are certain stumps that are at least more than a year old that were cut in the area. And Mr. Sullivan did not own the property at that time until he only owned it a year ago. And without knowing all of the history, I'll simply say if I was selling a property like this, I might want to try to improve its view a little before I was selling it. And what's interesting about these, and you have to look at the plans, Mr. Sullivan is part of a 2-lot subdivision that was approved in 2019. His property reaches the water, but essentially it reaches it at a point, okay? If you remember it, because I'm sure many of you were there for the order of conditions, it comes down to a point that reaches the water, and the neighboring lot is a broad lot that's in front of it that's still owned by the original subdivider. I visited the property, say, with Mr. Sullivan. He can explain in more detail if you have some questions, but the essence of it is that he asked his neighbor, can I clean out some of the wood and the like, fallen trees and brush that's sitting down in here? It makes it hard to walk in the area, get around in there. And his neighbor consented to him to do so. And if you look at the property, this is a 200-foot riverfront area that just reaches Mr. Sullivan's pool and everything. It's a significant distance back to get there. Mr. Sullivan has a heavy equipment company, so he brought back, what did you specifically?
Mini excavator.
A mini excavator, so that they could carry some of the wood and materials backwards, to there, rather than have humans pick them up and move them in that area. There clearly, when we were there, is one tree that they cut that is on the actual coastal bank. It's in the 5th picture in the matter. And that was a tree that had already fallen down in that area. And, it's always an interesting thing, and I think homeowners don't realize it, that commissions tend to want to protect even trees that have fallen on a bank. But there's no question that Mr. Sullivan's people cut that tree. We could go through each of the photos. A lot of the property that's shown on the photos is not even Mr. Sullivan's. I think the biggest problem I have with the proposed enforcement order is that it comes with a specific number of trees already decided must be in the plan. And I think what makes more sense is that in terms of an enforcement order, that we be given an enforcement order to come back with a plan by, I think you said a February date, and that we get, I'll say, our experts, for want of a better way to put it, to meet with Ms. Usowski on the property and come up with a better understanding between both of them as to what trees were cut and what areas there was consideration of. Ms. Usowski said there's a few places that she believes trees were pulled up. Okay, well, we have an expert and come down and meet with them. So that's the primary concern I have, is putting a specific number of trees on it now when the number and appropriate mitigation can be determined. It's also, you know, this is classic Cape Cod scrub sort of area. It's gonna grow back very quickly on its own in there. It has, a lot of light comes through because there was some limiting. A related issue, and there is always the issue of, I'll say, a blatant violation, we never would have permitted it if it had come to us beforehand, versus a violation that you didn't obtain a permit. Obviously, removing trees and things like that are not a preferred way to do vista pruning, okay, in the matter. But both the Rivers Protection Act and your own bylaw does allow vista pruning within an area. And I would suggest that without a complete analysis of that, it's hard to conclude at this moment completely that if a permit hadn't been applied for, some of the limbing type of thing might have been approvable. So I would call, there is a lot of potential for some of this to be a violation for failure to get pre-approval than necessarily a violation of the substance of what Harwich is intending to protect. And I think if you look, there was not a lot of groundwork very close to the coastal bank in that area. It's at least 25 feet of which there's not groundwork. I think it's, you show the bank in photo number 1 in the order there. But I'm not.
There was work, because there was a tree taken down on the coastal
Right.
bank.
No.
So to say there was no work there, and we have a 50-foot no disturb zone.
Right,
Just to
yeah.
put that on.
Yeah, no, I think it's, it's something, the mitigation can need to be determined and looking at that, but this is not a clear cutting of in the area to the bottom, and it's also a very flat area. It's not a flat area, then there's the steep coastal bank. It's not area of significant runoff.
Well, just,
With that,
can I
yeah.
just say, what my intent was, I texted my neighbor whose property abuts mine. There's piles of old brush all over the property, which I'm sure you saw. There's logs, there's trees that have been probably there for 10 years. They're rotted, they have termites in them, they're all laying down. I said to him, can I pick up the dead brush behind our houses, in the water view? He said, no problem. I think the confusion was he was anticipating me picking them up by hand. I brought him in the excavator in to pick up the logs because they were 14 to 18 inches around. I picked up the dead brush that was on the ground, cleaned up anything that was dead laying on the ground. There was a tree that was, the only tree we cut was a tree that was snapped over, and that was the only cut we made. Like he said, with the stumps, I mean, some of the stumps have trees growing out of the stumps. I mean, we did not cut, those are probably 3-4 years old.
Okay.
So I'm not saying I didn't bring a machine back there and I didn't pick up dead brush, but we weren't out there dropping trees. If we were dropping trees, we would have dropped trees.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No.
All right, some comments from the commissioners. Wayne, would you like to?
I was down there this morning and I saw 3 oak stumps that are not that old, of approximately 8 inches, 6 to 8 inches in diameter, right on the coastal bank that were cut. And there's branches on the beach that have fallen that you can see fresh cut marks on, well, whenever they were cut, they're brown, but they're not ancient, laying on the beach. And there's one that's hanging from a tree, a great big branch that was obvious.
That's the tree that had snapped over and was hung up in 2 or 3 other trees, and I was trying to get it out of them.
Al?
Not right now, I don't have any comment
Trying to get a sense of how much activity was in the 0 to 50-foot no disturb zone in terms
It's
of.
hard to tell exactly what, there was a machine brought in there was tree cutting, there was disturbance to the ground cover.
Quite a bit.
Right. So in that case, I would certainly support fines for any tree cutting in the 0 to 50 no disturb zone.
Jim?
No additional comments.
Mark?
I agree with Brad. I also agree with Wayne. Looks to me like the activity in general is pretty extensive, and probably would have to debate everything you've said. I would be in favor of pretty significant replanting, and I think it's appropriate to have a plan done, and I would encourage some pretty large caliber trees to go in as well, probably 6-inch caliber. And it looks to me like there was minimum of 6, and I would really be more inclined to look at a dozen significant trees to be replaced. All I have to add.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's said before. Amy, you mentioned that there was some limbing as well. You didn't mention that in the fines. I would suggest that we include that in whatever fines we decide to do. Even though we may or may not have approved that before the fact, but this is an after the fact issue. I guess that's all I have. Thank you.
Stan, any comments?
No additional comment.
Okay. Yeah, my only comments are that you come before us, and essentially, if I summarize what you've suggested to us, is that you brought in an excavator and you cleaned up the undergrowth, and that was it. I find that a stretch of the imagination for anybody that's been out there and walked the property. I mean, it's pretty clear that that's just been completely torn up. All the undergrowth is gone in there. And if all you were doing is bringing in your excavator to pick up branches, that thing was moving all over the place. And I mean, it just belies.
I mean, what, we were tracking back and forth, picking piles of brush up. There's extensive piles of brush that are still out there. And it takes quite a bit of tracking of a machine back and forth to load the truck with the brush. And I get it disturbed the ground, and it may look worse than it is, but.
Yeah, and there was clear evidence that there were trees that were limbed up as well. So it just belies my imagination that you can come to us and say all we did was get an excavator in there and pick up piles of brush. It's disturbing. So, with that in mind, Amy, you have another comment?
Can I just ask a question of Mr. Sullivan? So we'll talk about this in a minute because we're gonna talk about your house property, up by the house. But you had to come in front of the Conservation Commission a year ago for all that work, and at that time, there had been a violation because you had cut into the 1 to 200 riverfront area. Why did you not, when you were bringing a machine right up to the top of a coastal bank pretty much, I'm just curious why you didn't make a phone call to Conservation, why you didn't consider that based on the fact that you have history with coming in front of this board?
We weren't causing erosion, we were picking up dead stuff off the ground.
That is habitat in a no disturb zone.
Okay.
Just wanted to add that, sorry.
All right, so, Amy, what is your recommendation again?
So my recommendation is it's hard to tell on the site what exactly is 117 and what is 123 Riverside. But in relation to this activity of bringing an excavator in and doing the tree cutting, my recommendation is that you issue an enforcement order for Mr. Sullivan to supply a restoration planting plan by February 1st. We don't have to do an after-the-fact notice of intent for that. Same thing can be accomplished in enforcement. And after a plan that you would approve by February 1st, that cuts down a little bit on paperwork on your end too, and accomplishes the same thing. So an after the fact, not an after the fact, sorry, replanting plan that includes the area where we brought the machine, the ground covers, low shrub layer, and trees. And I would be happy to meet your expert, your consultant out there, more than happy to meet them to decide exactly how. It's up to the commission, so as far as fines, and these can be contested, obviously, but a $300 fine for limbing. Sorry, let me go back to this. I mean, it's up to the commission about the number of trees, but you could do per, and and a definite $300 fine for the destruction of the shrub or ground cover layer. So I guess the discussion would be is like, do you want to just do, I think the main, my main goal would be restoring the habitat value of this area. So if there's a discrepancy on the number of trees, if we're not exactly sure, I would, knowing that we're gonna have a replanting plan, and that you would do a $300 fine for the trees cumulative, because we don't know an exact number. 300 for limbing, and 300 for destruction of ground cover. So $900 fine for those activities.
Initially, you were of the mind there might have been 6 trees cut down. I've heard somebody else here say that they felt there might be up to 10 trees that were removed from that property. Do you have any evidence of this to substantiate the 6?
I mean, I have photos of several of the stumps, as well as the holes, where maybe, it's hard to say whether those holes were, to be honest, were old stumps or newer stumps. The ones that were cut, I would have to relook again. Most of the cuts that I saw, that I said, and I try to be careful and not look at ones that are clearly very old, because I knew that Mr. Sullivan bought the property not too long ago, but I was saying 6, and I thought I was being conservative.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman, which is that Mr. Sullivan mentioned, and it was sort of an aside, and I didn't quite get it straight, that there were some stumps there with something growing out of the stump, and you removed them. To me, that's regrowth.
No, they're still there. We did not remove them. There's stumps that are there with things growing out of them.
Sprouts coming out of the side of it.
So.
Untouched.
I didn't count those.
All right, okay, just clarifying, thank you.
No, I counted the ones that are like clearly nothing growing.
Any other discussion? John?
Just in response to this, my approach, what I would suggest is that Amy's first estimate was 6 trees removed. I suggest we levy the fine for 6 trees, and you're gonna go out there and inspect things more closely and with their expert. And if you come to a different conclusion as a result of that, then we can reconsider.
That sounds fair. I should have thought of that.
Other comments?
Yeah, based on, I mean, I sort of like John's idea that Amy go out with their expert to make a determination. What I'm concerned about is whether or not we should issue the fine now or wait till we get that determination and keep the option open to issue a fine based on that determination.
I think that's reasonable.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
You might substantiate the 10, you might find there are only
Right.
3, so.
Exactly.
Do you want to hold off on any fines at this point, or do you want to levy fines on the other activities that were a little bit more clear, such as the limbing and disturbance to the ground?
My personal opinion is to wait, do it all at once.
Yeah, and Ernie, I would agree with you on that. And that right now we do the enforcement order to require the replanting plan, and then direct Amy to go out with their expert to do an evaluation and then come back to us, and we'll determine fines at that point in time.
All right. Do we need to, so it doesn't sound like we need to do anything on this, other than, do we need a motion for an enforcement
Motion
order?
to issue an enforcement order for a replanting plan by February 1st.
Yeah, all right.
Okay.
Can we have someone make a motion
Sure.
on that, please?
I'll make a motion that we issue an enforcement order to require a replanting plan submitted no later than February 1st, 2023.
Second. Seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries, thank you. So this will come up again at the 19th, or 16th, rather? Meeting of the 16th?
We
or
can
you
put
need-
it on for an update if I have one yet. Hopefully I'll meet with Carrie's, Mr. Sullivan's consultant or expert about the trees, an arborist, somebody about the trees in the next week or two would be helpful. Okay,
Okay, all right.
so we'll pencil it in, but for an update next time, but let's see if we can get a meeting first. Okay? But in the meantime, he should look to start his plan.
All right, good, thank you.
Thanks.
So we want to talk about 120,
Sorry.
123 Riverside Drive. Do you want to give us
Yeah.
an update on this, Amy?
Yeah, so, on your, property of 123, where you're, up near where your house is, we have a DEP file number for, a restoration, essentially, a restoration of the 1 to 200 foot riverfront area on the property. And when this came up about the abutting issue, on your property and your neighbors, we did look at whether you were in compliance with your other permit, and I find that you are not. And in the following ways, you were supposed to install your mitigation plants, by spring of this year. You didn't do so. I do understand, and I know Tabitha is on the line, but, that you might have had some issues sourcing them. I understand there's a shortage. There should have been at least communication with our department, efforts shown. You were able to locate the other plants for your property and plant those. The area that you were supposed to replant appears to be something like Kentucky bluegrass and not Cape Cod mix, which is what you were supposed to have put down. It appears to also be treated, which you're not supposed to be doing. Again, you didn't plant, so you didn't provide a monitoring report. So my recommendation is $900 worth of fines for that, and that you must replant by May 1st, 2023. Failure to do so or communicate with this department or commission about why you can't would mean potentially daily fines. So I would love to hear from you and from Tabitha, and I think the commission would as well, why that area didn't get planted and why it is essentially a manicured lawn right now.
Okay, the essence of it is, and Tabitha is the expert, and I think we've got her here, okay. She's the person, by the way, who's been texting me questions about things. If you heard my phone going bing, just communicating to her. But the answer is, which Tabitha can speak to, is that the house, they was working on getting finished at the, in June of this year, and that Davenport Tree Farm was unable to get sufficient trees of the native variety to meet the requirements to plant them at the time. I think I did point out, and I said it specifically to Ms. Usowski, that we clearly failed to notify the order of conditions that we were having these issues. Tabitha, can you speak to the availability of plants? We've got you muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Hi. Yes, sourcing plants this year all the way through last fall was next to impossible. It actually came to a point where a lot of our local nurseries and other tree farms worked together this year to try and keep each one of our customers happy. As far as conservation and mitigation plantings, places like Sylvan Nursery, there's the Rhode Island Nursery, they are growing them, but with the conditions they had and the lack of help they had, the quality of the plants was awful. I did even try to reach out to some more local people, and I was unable to reach anybody. I did not realize I had a deadline on this, so I do apologize if I was supposed to reach out. But I do have the plants reserved for next year. They're due in April. They'll sit in that greenhouse until the frost is gone, and they will be put in the ground.
There's one other issue too, that was brought up. Ms. Wazowski talked about that, Mr. Sullivan and Ms. Knox were able to, plant some of their actual, landscaping plants. And if you look at the second picture in the, violation notice, you can see that, the primary landscaping plants that were planted were arborvitaes. And
Yes.
can you speak to their availability and why they ended up getting planted?
Those are more readily available. We actually spaded those trees off of our property for Mr. Sullivan, the arborvitaes that were there. So we had those growing here on hand. If you were to call around now, anywhere from here to Falmouth, you're not going to be able to find even those arborvitaes. The eastern red cedars that were required according to the plan that I have here, those took, Carrie, I want to say almost 4.5 months for us to secure them. And then we were told that they were not going to be dug because of the lack of rain and the lack of help. So I actually was just able to get those trees in last night. And we had to drive down to New Jersey to pick them up.
And I think we have we have 6 more that just came in that she's talking about that are ready to be planted now.
Correct.
And those were ordered last year.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And I think the final issue, running down your issues to address, were this area of planting had a seed lawn thrown in that area because it was essentially bare, post-construction dirt area sitting there, and it was done to stabilize the area. It's going to end up being planted over in the near future.
That's the same lawn that when we talked about stabilizing, when we hydro-seeded it, which was my instructions by the board last time when it was fill, and we said we all came to an agreement that we were gonna loam it and hydro-seed it.
With a Cape Cod mix.
That's the same grass.
It looked like a monoculture to me.
Well, either way, it's going to disappear. It's there to stabilize because it's.
But
if you
nothing-
look at the, the mitigation plan, it is covered with plants. The area is going to disappear when the plants become available. Okay, so it's acting to stabilize the area. That's what.
The idea
done.
was just to make sure it's something natural there.
Yeah.
So
So-
if you have the specs on what you used, again, when you threw it down, because it's just seed, I can't tell what it's going to be. But it was the expectation that it be a Cape Cod mix.
I think the concern is that it appears fairly evident that it's been fertilized as well. Maintain the growth, perhaps, whatever. There's no weeds on it. So herbicides have been used on it as well. All of that, I think, is contrary to what our intentions were and what our instructions were at the time.
Even inside the fencing, there's not supposed to be any fertilizing or chemical usage.
So, let's have questions or any comments from the commissioners on this aspect of the hearing tonight. Wayne?
No, I don't have anything. It's pretty well covered.
Alan?
No comment.
Brad?
I would favor maintaining the fine for the fertilizer use in that area. To me, I went by a couple times, it's just, just green. So to me, that's a violation that should not be excused. The second violation, I think that is a decent excuse for not receiving the plants, and so I'm okay with not fining for that. And then I think that the monitoring report should have been filed, so I think there should be a fine for that.
Okay. Jim?
I have no additional comments, but I agree with Brad.
I have no further remarks.
John?
Yeah, I agree with Brad.
And Dan, any comments?
No additional comment.
Okay.
Can I ask a follow-up? I'm sorry if I missed that, Brad. So you had said you're in favor of the fine for the fertilizers. You understand why they might not have been able to source and do the plants, so you're okay with not happening. But what did you say about the monitoring report?
It was still required. It was not submitted, correct?
It wasn't submitted, but the only reason it would have been submitted is if they actually did the planting.
Oh, so, okay.
They're tied. So the monitoring report was for the mitigation plantings, which did not go in.
It wasn't required no matter what, it just.
Well, it says it says a monitoring report is required June 1st. It wasn't done, but if they didn't do, sorry, I'm just
So-
trying to clarify.
Well,
So as you pointed out, there was no communication with you about them not, and the monitoring report, if there was no ability to plant the things, that's what the monitoring report should have said, so. if nothing
Agreed, I was
done,
just trying to understand.
I'm with Brad, it's a fine.
Oh, I thought he was saying, okay. Okay.
Well, I don't know.
What,
Anyway.
that's what I was trying to say, since they had not communicated with you
Okay.
at all, there should
Yeah.
have been a fine for that,
Okay.
whether you call it the monitoring report or not communicating,
Okay.
whichever.
Yeah, and Ernie,
I got it now.
With both what John and Stan said, that, there was a monitoring report required. If there was no substance to that monitoring report, that should have been communicated to Amy within the deadline.
Okay. Just a question for you, Amy. We've had other projects that were similar to this as far as timelines and that sort of thing that also had planting requirements. Did they fulfill those planting requirements in other instances?
Most have, a couple have talked to me about, that they can't source plants, or they're worried about keeping them alive with the drought, and our water department has actually, when a property has mitigation plantings to do, they asked me for a list of all those properties that would be required to irrigate, and they waived any fines or enforcement because we put a condition on that these plants have to live. So most have, we have a lot of projects right now that have various deadlines, so we're in the process of coming up with a more comprehensive spreadsheet rather than just a written list of what is due when for everybody. Because we have more properties than ever with many moving parts, and we're trying to keep track of them.
Yeah.
Some people had a problem sourcing, others were able to. So, I mean, I do understand that there was a shortage this year, but should have been communicated, or partial, at least. I mean, there was a number of plants, and they're not all trees, there's a lot of shrubs, some of that work probably could have been done. We were able to do we did a lot of planting this year. We had to change varieties, or we had to only do partial, but we did it, so.
All right, so had they communicated with you, then perhaps you could
Yeah,
have
I would
realized-
find it hard to believe that not everything could be found.
Yeah.
It could have been partial.
Yeah, okay, all right, well, with that in mind, I guess I'm also in favor of what Brad has put forth for the $200-300 fines. We've also already established that do we have a deadline now for the plantings?
I am recommending, and Tabitha, I'm glad you're on, because my recommendation is May 1st, but I would be willing to extend that to like May 15th, because you said you're gonna get them in April. Of course, April, there's still a chance of a frost.
Yes.
So thing here is, if you run across issues, please communicate them with me, so I can communicate them with the board. But I would be okay with, not May 1st, but May 15th.
All right.
For at least starting the replant and communication, okay?
Okay, good.
But a
Absolutely.
finished replant ideally by the end of spring 2023.
Okay.
So I will make a motion on this that we assess a fine for $300 for applying fertilizer in the riverfront area at 123 Riverside Drive, and also another $300 fine for failure to provide monitoring reports or updates on the plantings by June 1st as required, and that we also have a deadline of May 15th, 2023 for the plantings to be completed.
Started.
Started.
So finished by end of spring
I would say
2023.
June 15th would be reasonable, 30 days to complete.
We would like you to start it. So I'd be
Start
saying,
it on May 15th.
say it
I
on May
think we could be
15th
done.
and finish by the end of spring, whatever that date happens to be in June.
As long as we're seeing progress and getting.
Yeah, we need to
reports.
see progress, okay?
Yeah, now, the monitoring report deadline of June 1st has expired, so I'm sorry, I'm continuing my motion here. Is there a new deadline you'd like to set for that?
They were supposed to do one also by December of this year. What I would like is to start on the right path and have you submit something basically with that nothing has been done because of shortage, blah, blah, blah. It can be very brief, it can be in an email, but some record of this would be good, even though we're gonna have annual records. So, and then next year, by December 1st, and the following 2 years after that, you're to be submitting annual monitoring reports. Okay?
So if I can continue my motion then, the plantings have to be started by May 15th, completed by June 15th, and monitoring reports shall commence on December 1st of 2023 and continue for 2 years, 2 subsequent years on the December 1st of each year. Any comments on that discussion?
Second?
Yeah. Discussion? No? All in favor then?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carries. Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Next item on the agenda is discussion and possible vote to submit a request to the administration for town council to provide legal opinion regarding the property at 374 Main Street and open meeting law question. This item, I think, is an outgrowth from the Board of Selectmen hearing meeting that we had this past, a week ago Monday. We had advised the selectmen that there was a 2009 opinion of council that pertained to the oversight of the bogs at 374 Main Street, which were presently being considered for being taken over by Cape Cod Tech for educational purposes. And they indicated to us they did not have that legal opinion. You indicated at the meeting that you would be providing them with that. Has that been done?
It was immediately done the next morning.
Okay, all right. Do we need then a vote for that? Or is there something else that
No, what I would suggest is, so at the meeting, I think, and I don't want to speak out of turn, I think the selectmen may be also reviewing that document, because it was a 2009 document. There was question, I think, of, they clearly have the right for the holding of the lease and things like that. The the document bring up questions about, you know, it says care and custody, and basically, if there's a decision to be made on that property, who should be involved in that decision-making? And I just think, and I would gladly put it on behalf of both Conservation and Board of Selectmen, if Board of Selectmen wanted to answer that same question too, maybe they already have, but it would be something that I want to share with them. But I think it's really just to get some clarity, so we can avoid the commission, avoid conversations like the one that was had last week.
So one of the issues that came up at the meeting as well early on, I think, was, although one of the selectmen asked that the board obtain input from the Conservation Commission, I know when I spoke, I was asked whether or not whether we, as the commission, had a public meeting for authorizing me to speak for the board, with the board, rather. And I said we had not, so I think we need to do that tonight, authorizing the Conservation Commission to discuss this topic with the Board of Selectmen. And that was my takeaway from the meeting, from what I saw at it. Jim?
Mr. Chairman, going back to sort of the first issue with regard to the legal opinion, I think in my mind, the issue really revolves around what is the role of the Conservation Commission vis-a-vis this piece of property. And to me, that we need to get some clarification on, and that may be the question that we ask for a legal.
I like the way you put it. I'm writing it down.
Okay, thanks, Amy. And I think we need to understand that before we can go any further with this issue.
Okay, after you, John.
Yes, so, I mean, that Monday evening was hardly the first time the chairman of the Conservation Commission has gone before the Board of Selectmen, or, excuse me, the Select Board, to discuss issues that are before the Conservation Commission. I don't recall ever being requested or it ever being suggested that the Conservation Commission needs to have a formal vote empowering the chairman to discuss issues with the Board of Selectmen. So I'd like to understand whether that's a general rule that we have to observe every time there's a meeting between the chairman and the select board. I mean, or.
It wasn't my understanding of it, but I can ask the town administrator about that. My listening in, my take on it was, there was the question of if there was a public meeting with the commission held about this topic, which we said there had been ones earlier in the spring with Bob Sanborn, but I think he meant more recently in anticipation of that other meeting. And in which case we did not have, you know, a public meeting for that. But maybe it wasn't discussed that the commission would or would not be at that meeting, something like that. I don't think you need permission
I
to
went
come
back
and
and
talk, but.
listened to it a number of
Okay,
times,
yeah.
and the question that was specifically asked of me was, did we have a public meeting and vote of the commission for me to speak with the board?
Okay.
So, in consideration of that, I was asked to speak as an individual and
Okay.
not a representative of the Conservation Commission.
Okay, my misunderstanding.
Okay, in my looking at it, the question seemed to revolve around an issue of whether or not there was any violation of the open meeting law. And I think that we need to get clarification on, because, you know, again, you know, the chairman of various committees does speak with the Board of Selectmen on various issues, some of which may have been decided by their board, some of which may not have been formally decided by their boards, but had been discussed in public meetings by those boards. So I think that's where we need some clarification as to how to proceed in the future.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, Brad?
And were you invited to that meeting to speak on this topic? Is that?
No, we were not.
Okay. The second point I want to make is, in terms of properties under the care and custody of the Conservation Commission, what I've seen in 13 years is that plans are developed by the Conservation Commission, they're voted on by the Conservation Commission. If they happen to involve a lease, then the Board of Selectmen needs to approve and be signatory to those leases. But the decisions on how to manage that property, if it's truly under the care and custody of the Conservation Commission, it starts here. That's what I've seen.
And in general, when the board is considering a lease, do they ask for input if the Conservation Commission has care and custody of those lands?
What I've seen in my, limited time is it's the other way around. We prepare, we decide, we prepare the lease, and then we bring it to the Board of Selectmen. And then they have a discussion, they have a hearing, they approve it or not, and they're signatories to it. So that's the way it's gone.
Okay. Alan, do you have a comment?
Well, I may want to go to the table and speak as a private citizen on that. Please. Stand up here. That was my whole intent, is to speak as a private citizen.
Gotta go to a mic though.
Sorry. Town Hall, Depot Street, North Howard, speaking as a private citizen. That's what I did last week. Thank you.
So, would you like me to put in a request for a legal opinion, one, about the role of the Conservation Commission regarding 374 Main, and two, about the potential open meeting law issue? And the question essentially, do we need to have a meeting to vote to have you speak on behalf of the commission? So,
I think it'd be good to have the attorney give an opinion on those three subjects.
yeah, and I would, so this goes through the administration office. Definitely want to share it with everybody.
Let me just ask, I mean, they have a copy of the opinion.
Of the 2009 document, they do.
2009, and I think someone reading that could reasonably conclude that it suggests that any decisions made by the board with regard to this particular property should be done in consultation with the Conservation Commission. Now, if they want to clarify that, then perhaps they should go to ask for an opinion of council.
Is that how you read that? That 2009 letter?
Do you have a copy of it?
I don't have it with
We don't
me.
want to read it now.
No.
Yeah,
This is not the place for it.
I view it as kind of the other way around. I'd have to look at it again.
But
If it's a care and custody of the Board of Selectmen, then yes, it's their management, it's their process to develop a plan for that property. And then if it involves any other type of board, then they might discuss it with that board. But in this case, it begins here.
Jim, yeah, I'm sorry.
No, that's perfectly all right, Ernie. No, I mean, my feeling is that we as Conservation Commission just need clarification as to what our role is. And, if we ask for a legal opinion, certainly the attorney would look at that 2009 document, would look at other documents related to the role of the Conservation Commission, the bylaws, the statutes of the town of Harwich. But I think we as Conservation Commission just need clarification because there seems to be some confusion on that issue.
Fair point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I would perhaps leave it that the document definitely mentions both Conservation and the Board of Selectmen in decisions being made on that, being taken on that property. And at the meeting a week ago Monday, I think the selectmen elected to make a decision without any input from the Conservation Commission.
That was my view of what happened yesterday.
So I think it would be reasonable to go to council and ask them for their opinion on that.
And is this document publicly available? I mean, we may not want to spend time or not be able to spend time on it here at this meeting, but I would certainly like to see the document, particularly if we're going to have a conversation with council about what the document means. That'll be pretty
public
tough if I don't know
information.
what's
Is
in
it,
it.
if it's
Should
an
be.
opinion of council, or is it privileged?
It was given to me without, this was a long time, this was before my time.
We weren't asked to turn it back. I still have my copy.
Oh,
Yeah.
We weren't asked to turn it back in
Yeah.
under executive session or anything.
Yeah.
well, I would request then that somebody make a copy of this document available to all members of the Conservation Commission.
Yeah, it pertains to you, so I can
Yeah.
ask to, just make sure, I want to make sure we do
Yeah,
everything right.
Well, don't do anything that's going to raise any hackles.
All right. So, do we need a motion on that, or?
Let's,
is
yes,
that-
let's,
Do this with a motion?
request
With our
for
open
council
meeting law
legal opinion,
requirements.
please.
Well, I'd like to move that we request a legal determination from the town council in regards to property at 374 Main Street, as well as the open meeting law question pertaining to that property.
And I would like to both second it, but also propose an amendment that with regard to the property on Main Street, that we request a clarification as to what the role of the Conservation Commission is in decisions made with respect to that property.
I have an issue too, please. Can we also add to that total clarification of care and custody? Finite, what does that mean? Because clearly there's a difference of opinion, so.
Yeah, no, good idea, agreed to all amendments.
Okay.
All right, so do we have a clear motion on this?
We have a motion that I amended, that Mark amended, so do we need a second on the amendments, Ernie?
We haven't had a second on the.
We had a second on the first.
Yeah, Jim
no,
did.
Sorry, I missed that.
Basically, I seconded the First Amendment, but then
Okay,
the
I'd like
first motion, but then amended.
seconds on the amendments then too,
Right.
please. So who is giving a second on the two amendments to that?
Well, I'll second them.
Thank you, John.
Okay, John, you're seconding both amendments?
I am seconding both amendments.
Okay, good.
All right, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries then.
If I can ask a question on 374 Main Street, and just let me know if it's not appropriate at this point. Under this discussion item, can we talk about that property? And what I would like to do is ask if at some point we can revisit the last discussion we had on that property, where we did look at a series of items we wanted to see some compliance on, cleaning up the property, and some accounting for what came out of that last
I don't think it's
hearing.
appropriate the way it was
Okay.
put on the agenda for tonight.
Okay.
But we can do that for next time.
And I think
Super.
that's dependent on the care and custody definition guidance that we received too.
It does.
If
I
it's the
mean, I'm-
board, then it's their responsibility. If it's us, then.
Right. I'm pretty confident the way this is gone under my tenure. But let's get the legal opinion.
Yeah.
But I'd be very surprised if it's not, as it's done, it has been done. Okay, thank you, Amy, for that clarification.
All right. Now, this open meeting law question, is there anything there you wanted to discuss tonight?
There were, well, that a couple people had asked about whether or not there was claim of potential open meeting law violation. And I would, if you wanted to have clarification on whether there was or wasn't, I can ask based on the situation.
We just
I think it
motioned-
was included.
Yeah, we just motioned
It's
that.
in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, it's in here.
Yeah,
Yeah, so-
that's part of the motion.
So I'd like to go on the record as saying too, that at the Board of Selectmen meeting, we did not have a quorum.
Mm-hmm.
And at none of the prior meetings that we've had as a Conservation Commission on that property or regarding that property, have we had a quorum outside of a public meeting?
Mm-hmm,
That's right.
thank you.
All right, thank you. Next item, leaving that behind, is updates on ongoing tasks. So the first one we have is
Thompson's Field.
Thompson Field.
It's me, but if you do too. We're still trying to set up a date to, for myself, Ernie, and Mark, to meet with our animal control officer to go over the list of topics she has provided in preparation for having a public meeting on the topic of the management of that area. So Jen, our animal control officer, is on vacation for the next week, but hope to have her, to talk with her the week after. As soon as I get a date from her, I will let you know. But before we have a public meeting, it is a good idea to meet with her.
Brad, Herring River City, anything new?
No, I think Amy's been super busy, and I think,
I'm really trying. It's
know.
on my list
I know.
to finish, to make all the I've started making the edits.
Yep. So I think we'll see that at some point soon, and then
Will.
we'll get those to the full commission, and then we'll ask for review of those, so.
I'm gonna put it on.
Yep.
Number 16.
Yep.
Bell's Neck Land Management Plan revision. This is a little broader than I had as far as gate controls and all, but
I think it's all encompassing is why we did it this way, because we can talk about the gates, you can talk about the plan itself, you can, yeah, Bell's Neck
bog
Land.
maintenance, if anything. Is that part of it?
Well,
it's
how
the-
you're gonna manage that area, not necessarily whether it's a bog or not, but how you're gonna manage.
You know, there's a 10-year management plan that was done over 10 years ago. This commission voted 2 years ago to redo that plan.
Yep.
And as well as they voted on a preferred option on how to manage. And so it's been kind of dormant for a while. We've been busy with everything else. So I think the next step is Amy's going to get a copy of that
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have done that this time.
and circulate it, and then folks can review it. And I know myself, I'm going to start to dive in and start to, edit it. Obviously, it's a draft edit, and just start to rewrite it. And it's a new commission somewhat since the last time we voted on this, so it's perfectly okay to revisit the voted on plan. But right now, that's the record. We voted to revise the plan. We voted to pursue option B of that, possible management scenarios. That's where we are.
All right, good, thank you.
I'll put that in Dropbox by the end of the week.
Okay, Alan, any news on the gate?
I haven't got any updates. This past week's been a whirlwind, so.
All right.
Sorry.
Harvest, right?
Child fertilizer regulation, again, that was mine, and I have not done anything other than, I did notice there have been a number of articles written, I see more and more of them, that people are writing about supporting a ban, and this is outside of Harwich. I mean, these are articles being written from people in other towns, that it seems like it's gathering some momentum, which is, from my perspective, a good thing. So the last thing is the alternate member voting.
Yep, so I tasked that to Melissa. We need to chat with administration because they're doing a bunch of charter changes in anticipation for town meeting. We want to see if we can get on that.
Great, good.
But, so we will continue to follow up with that.
What was administration's reaction?
I'm saying we have to talk to administration about getting that on because I think he's connected obviously with the Charter Review Committee. So get it on his agenda, get it on the Charter Review Committee's agenda radar.
Okay.
So, and the question would be is, well, the two points that you had asked was, could an alternate, obviously in the event we don't have a quorum, an alternate needs to be able to vote. But even if you missed a member, like, if Brad came in late this evening, if we had an alternate could that member, even if we have a quorum, could that member become a full member? So those are the two questions.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, good. Terrific.
Ernie,
then-
quick question for you on the fertilizer. Anything that you would like to task anybody on the commission with looking into, you know, for the next steps there? Just to keep that one going.
Yeah, I've been trying to get my head around that. I mean, is there anybody here that's interested in becoming more involved in this?
Well, I do have contacts with the town of Orleans. I know one of the shellfish wardens who's also on the water quality task force, I think they call it. And so she has given me an update on where they are. And so if there are any specific questions.
I've traded emails with Michael Herman, who's on their select board up there, and he's been the one that's been spearheading this in their town. And he's out of town, he's supposed to be getting back, might already be back. So let me talk to him. I know there's some other people in the community who are interested in this that we might want to tap as sort of quasi-representatives of
Advisory.
of the commission. You agree with that?
Advisory, or, yeah, maybe not task them, but if they have information that they would like to share,
Yeah.
make sure they're invited to a meeting.
Yeah. And remind me, would the lead be the Conservation Commission or more the Board of Health?
Well, it's supposed to be joint, really.
Yeah.
Between
I mean,
at least three.
We passed, we passed our proposal and sent the letter to the Board of Selectmen. At the last Board of Health meeting, I don't know if you saw it or not, they started to get wrapped up around the wording of our letter, in that we mentioned in it that we would be willing to help write regulations if it was ever passed, and they didn't feel that that was the right word, that they weren't regulations per se, but it would be something other than that. So I guess they're still struggling with how they want to voice any support on that. So for now, it's us. Yeah. All right, anything else?
I got, Amy, a question, now that unfortunately I thought of it after they left, that Kerry Sullivan, that, do we need, is it all right to ask a question on that now that they've left?
Ask it, and then if something that they should have input on, we'll have to defer it.
Well, actually, it doesn't really pertain to him, it pertains to
Is it a- it's
the
a
owner of
general-
117. Do
Yeah.
we need permission to go on his land?
We have permission to
Yeah,
go
we
on
do
his
have.
land. Yes, we do.
Okay, all right, that was the only
Yep,
question.
and he is very much in favor. He basically has said in an email to us that whatever we decide as far as replanting, I mean, he'll essentially be okay with it.
Okay.
He wants to see it fixed. So we'll keep him in the loop,
Yeah.
obviously, like we told him we'd be in the loop. He knew about the meeting tonight. He could have been watching, so. But no, we have permission to go on his
Okay.
land in order to see what happened. You got a couple sets of minutes, and then I have an announcement.
Uh-oh.
They were in Dropbox. If you didn't review them, we can put them on next time, and we'll hopefully have another set by then.
You can just get rid of this on-site
There's,
one.
the on-site one is super quick. I do have a copy if you wanna pass it around real quick. That was the old coach on-site. The other set is a little longer. But if you wanna at least get rid of an old coach on-site meeting, you can do that.
I was not at that meeting, so I really can't comment on the accuracy of this, but
It's fine.
Mark, John, Stan, Jim?
It's fine.
Yeah, I wasn't there either.
Looked all right to me.
We have a motion on the
Anybody
minutes.
else need to see it?
Sure. I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of the meeting of October 13th, 2022, which was an on-site meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Let me ask you, Amy, with our agenda next week, should we look at there's one here from May 22nd?
It's not looking,
19th.
we have a couple big cases next time, but it's not as many.
Right.
We have 14 Mill, point. We have 3 Mark Lane coming back, finally, hopefully. And we have you agreed to let 28 Wawa Tacy remand to you. That's coming back. So, I wanna say that's it. So a couple big ones.
Yeah. All right.
Minutes, don't worry, don't.
All right, well, I just ask everybody, take a look at them before the next meeting so we can.
And we'll
so we
hopefully
can
have
just-
one more set in there as well, but
Okay.
So
at
you
least.
list 4 here, there were only 2
Yeah.
on, there aren't, right, there were only 2 on Dropbox,
There
right?
were only 2. There was only the on-site and May 19th. That was on Dropbox. Again, we hope we get more done, so we put it on the agenda, so if we're ready, they're there. But it's been a rough couple weeks, so. Been very, very busy. So.
What's new?
Vacation, boom.
As long as
What
I've
is
known you.
new? I know. I'm just like waiting, cause some years, not all years, we get like a holiday, like a 2-week lull-ish. Basically a time to catch up a little bit and not just tread water, which is what I feel like we do. But I'm really hoping we get that this year. I have a quick announcement. So on November 8th, I sent an email around, but I'm making a public announcement too. November 8th, our new AmeriCorps member, Dory, is going to be leading with Melissa and I a natural history / edible plant walk around the Bell's Neck Conservation Area. It is free. You can sign up online. This is her first walk she's led as our new member. She has a history of environmental education background. She's an excellent public speaker. I already know. So she's going to tell people a little bit about the various edible plants that you can find in the Bell's Neck Conservation Area. It's a good 2.5 mile, easy to moderate walk. And yeah, if anybody wants to, has time for an hour or 2 on Tuesday morning. I don't know why my eyes are all of a sudden burning. Please let us know. We can either sign you up or you can sign up again on the town website and the events calendar.
Is it limited?
That's next Tuesday?
Tuesday the 8th, 10 a.m., meeting at the Herring Ladder. But we are only doing 15 spots because you can't, talk over
Right.
everybody, or what I'm showing you here, Stan can't see.
Right.
So we're capping it.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, I know she's gonna talk about the typical, obviously, cranberries. We've already talked with Alan about wanting to do just a cranberry talk sometime, and obviously, Wayne, if you're interested. But, she's gonna talk about, you're gonna get a recipe for autumn olive, so you can put that invasive to use. Obviously talk about
Plenty
winter
of
green,
those,
she's
yeah.
gonna talk about a few other things, but, yeah, should be good.
Did you know that Japanese knotweed is edible?
Yep.
When
May
they're young,
learn.
like asparagus.
We don't have a lot of knotweed there, so we're gonna specifically talk about plants we have there. I did not know greenbrier was edible.
Either.
It is.
Really?
Greenbrier.
I
We
know.
are not encouraging people unless like wintergreen, something is very easily spotted, but if you see mushrooms on the site, we're not recommending it.
No.
If Liz is still around,
Yeah, she could probably help.
if Liz, we should, if she's around, another walk we should do.
Yeah, I'm not sure she'd be comfortable with telling people to eat a mushroom.
I'm
Maybe
not
we're
going
saying,
to.
we don't say you can eat them, but we could talk about the different types.
Yeah.
That we
Yeah.
think they are.
Yeah,
They're
she
not
can
down
tell
the
you what a
Shaw's,
death
I'm not
cap
eating
is,
them.
for example.
Yeah, no, I would never recommend, no matter that you eat a mushroom, even no matter how confident you are.
Really?
You don't need that bad publicity.
Nope.
So, but anyway, that's a fun thing coming up.
There you go.
And can't think of anything else pressing right now. I have a lot of things for you to sign on your way out the door, okay?
I'll move to adjourn.
Alrighty.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Nice job.
So
You all right?
It's the hardest going.
these 3
Done?
things.
911?
Yep, so these are things we've signed before.
I was thinking, where would we put that in that?
Registry of Deeds
Maybe I
and